example of what, the many languages that we have come across with, and it's very interesting that many people don't acknowledge that, probably because they don't know that this is important, right? In any case, in the plurilingual framework, all the languages are interconnected, and we don't see languages as separated. So all this knowledge that we have about languages, not only languages, but cultures as well, plurilingualism and pluriculturalism, they go hand in hand. So, who is plurilingual? We're all plurilingual if you think about that, right? Even if we haven't had contact with other languages, even the languages within our own language, I'm sure that in Greek there are varieties as well. We were talking about Roma students, so picking up a little bit of their culture as well and language is extremely important. So I have conducted a literary review to learn what has happened since the CFR was implemented in 2001. So the CFR states that there are a lot of benefits for plurilingual education. Some of the benefits are it enhances cognitive, metacognitive skills, creativity, motivation. Something that is not particularly mentioned in the CFR is student identity, how this can be enhanced as well. But taking a look at some studies that have used the plurilingual framework, I found 16 empirical studies in many countries, not only European countries, but also in Canada, in Australia, even in Africa. And it was very interesting to find that the empirical studies do contribute and they confirm the suggestions made by the CFR. So that's very, very important. So 14 years later, the CFR was introduced. The suggestions of the empirical studies actually confirmed the theoretical framework suggestions. However, what I have found was that there is still a disconnect between theory and practice, so many teachers do have trouble to implement plurilingual frameworks in their classes. They are aware of that, but practice is still a challenge. Previous research has mainly focused on language and not the integration of language and culture. So that's particularly interesting as well, considering that plurilingual framework has to do with culture as well, right? And little attention has been given to minority languages, so Aboriginal languages, just to have an example. Sign language as well, which is another language. So there has been very, very little done with minority languages. And what I have found as well is that the languages that have been used in a plurilingual framework so far in research have been majority languages and a lot of European languages as well. That's not a problem, but it's important to recognize that minority languages need special attention. So a little bit of what I have done with students. I have worked at the IFP, it's an International Foundation Program at the University of Toronto. We receive students from all over the world, and these students are learning English to join a graduate or undergraduate program at the University of Toronto. So they have to pass this program in order to continue their studies at the university. And they are all learning English. So most of the students actually are from China. There is a lot of intake of students from China, but there are students from other countries as well, Spain, Brazil, you name it. So when all these students are in the classroom, and they're all there to learn English, they usually have a feeling that, oh, I'm here to learn English, it's 100% English, English only, and I want to learn about Canadian culture. Please teach me Canadian culture. And even Canadian culture, it's very complicated to say what Canadian culture is, because there is a lot of immigration in Canada, and even if there weren't, it's still, the idea of culture is a complex one. It's not easy to be taught in that way. So one of the things that I usually do is I ask students to think about their own plurilingual story in the very beginning. So I usually just show a slide like this, ask them to reflect about their linguistic and cultural knowledge in terms of place of birth. Of course, it will determine what kind of language and culture you're going to learn. Heritage, official language, school, media, travel, immigration, marriage, if they're married, children, globalization, identity, culture, job opportunity. So all of these dimensions will affect the languages and the cultures that we're going to learn and acquire as well. So I usually do this with students so that they understand that although they are studying in Canada, it's important that they learn each other's culture as well and language, why not, in the classroom. So this is an example of what I have done as a student for an assignment. I came up with a plurilingualism project, which is my own plurilingual trajectory and how this has shaped my identity. This is available on YouTube, so you can just type plurilingualism, you're going to find out. But this is something that can be done with students as well to highlight all the languages and cultures that they have within themselves already. This website called Breaking the Invisible Wall, it's my own website. I just use this website to store some of the students' work that I have done, and I usually ask them to watch each other's videos as well to come up with a reflection. And this is actually taking to the next project, which is a plurilingual video project. I have done this based on a theoretical framework from Bennett for intercultural sensitivity. So a lot of students arrive in Canada and they say that they have trouble adapting to the Canadian culture, like any other culture, of course, anybody else. So some of them are in denial, they don't want to learn the culture. Some of them are defensive. They start learning a lot about the culture and then they start neglecting their own. Oh, I'm not going to hang out with Chinese people anymore because I have to learn English. So all this is part of course, adaptation, but I usually come up with projects so that the adaptation is a little bit more smooth. So one of the things that I have done, I have written an article and this describes the project if you want to take a look at it. But I usually start with a discussion in class and I ask them questions like, what are some of the issues you have had while living in Canada? What are the problems? What is it that you don't understand? And then I start asking them, why do you think this was an issue? Why do you believe people think differently? Is this really a problem? How can you see this from a different perspective? Then I ask them to come up with a situation that they have been through and write a script. They usually work in groups, so they write a script of exactly what has happened to them. And I received the script and then I start asking questions. For example, if somebody says, oh, I don't like to hang out with Canadians because all they talk about is hockey. So I usually ask a question like, oh, okay, how about in your culture? Do you have a sport that is, you know, a major sport in your culture? Why do you think Canadians talk about hockey? You know, just to give an idea. So the idea is that through the script writing, the intention is that students start thinking about what is it that they are rejecting, or what is it that is really a problem, and trying to understand from other perspectives that this is not really a problem, it's just different points of view. And then after they give me the script, and I ask those questions, I ask them to rewrite the script, not to rewrite, but address some of my questions in a way to make them reflect about what's going on. There is a video recording, so they go on outside the campus and they start recording those scenes that they have written. And in the end, I ask them to watch each other's videos and reflect once again on what has happened to the other groups. So it has been extremely positive when, especially the last part, when students watch each other's videos, they usually go like, wow, this has happened to me too, that's interesting. And it's a very nice way for them to understand from others' perspectives what's going on. So some of the videos are available on this website as well if you want to take a look at it, especially this one. this was very interesting. We had a student from China, one from Brazil, one from Spain, and one from Haiti. And they were all talking about their view of beauty, what's beautiful in their culture. So the Chinese man was the host of a TV show, and he was asking the other people, what's your view about beauty? So it was very interesting. Of course, the Brazilian woman was like, oh, beauty is a woman dressing very well, putting lipstick on. Whereas the Haitian woman was like, oh, this is not really part of my culture. I don't think this is beautiful at all. And it's interesting because they, in a way, they presented all the stages from Bennett's framework in the video, like the denial, the defensive, and then later, wow, okay, now that you say that, you know, beauty is like this in your culture, I understand. So that was very, very interesting. Language portrait is another thing that I do with my students to mainly enhance their knowledge about all the languages that they have done. I'm just going to briefly show this. So all they do is they draw themselves and they write all the languages that they have had contact with in their body. So, well, the drawings already is a representation of the culture, right? So this is a Chinese man. He writes all the languages that he has had contact with. English, it's in his head because he feels that he was studying English, so it's something that it's cognitively, you know, effortful. Mandarin, Chinese, and then he writes the local accent. So here he acknowledges the varieties within the same language that he has. Cantonese, French, Korean, Spanish, and then he writes Babel right here. This one is particularly interesting as well because she wrote the words in the language as well. So she writes head in Korean, eyes in Japanese, and bouche, mouth in French, Chinese, English. This girl, she wrote Portuguese is in her heart because that's her first language. She was from Brazil, I believe. Japanese, Arabic, she said that she put it in her chest because she was dating a man from Saudi Arabia, and he was like, oh, right now it's in my chest. Not in my heart yet, but in my chest. This just goes to show all the languages they have had contact with, and it's very interesting because although they were in an English environment, they were also learning a little bit of words from each other, right? Might not be speaking the language super fluently, but learning at least a few words and a little bit, it's very important. So just to wrap up, considering we have thousands and thousands of language families, it's important that even in the target language that students are learning to acknowledge other languages, varieties, and cultures. So basically, all the suggestions made by the CFR, they are present in the literature and empirical studies as well, which is very good to know. And the main purpose is to value, respect, and motivate students to learn more and celebrate diversity. So these are some of the references that I have used. And if Harry starts.